Incredible. 80-year-old woman gives birth to 6 children, leaving everyone speechless. Imagine an event so extraordinary it challenges everything we think we know about life. An 80-year-old woman giving birth to 6 children? It sounds impossible, but it happened, and her story will leave you inspired and amazed. If you're ready for a journey into the unbelievable, make sure to subscribe to our channel now and never miss a story like this. Evelyn's perfectly manicured hands rested on the leather-bound journal in her lap, a gift from her late husband, Richard, that she had never found the courage to fill. Her reflection in the antique mirror across the room showed a woman who had aged gracefully. Silver hair styled immaculately, emerald green eyes still sharp and clear, and skin that bore the elegant lines of a life well lived, if perhaps not fully lived. "Another quiet evening," she whispered to herself, her voice barely disturbing the stillness that had become her constant companion since Richard's passing 5 years ago. Their marriage had been one of deep companionship and shared ambitions, but their singular focus on building their technology empire had left no room for children. It was a choice that had made sense at the time. There was always tomorrow, always next year, always later, until suddenly there wasn't. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 6 times, its deep resonance stirring Evelyn from her reverie. She rose slowly, smoothing her silk blouse with habitual precision. Tonight was different from other nights. She had promised to attend a charity gala at the children's hospital where she served as a board member. It was one of the many commitments she had taken on to fill her days, to give purpose to her considerable wealth and empty hours. As her driver, James, navigated the sleek black Mercedes through the city streets, Evelyn watched the families heading home for dinner, mothers clutching children's hands, fathers carrying tired toddlers on their shoulders. Each scene was a snapshot of the life that had passed her by, a reminder of the choices that couldn't be unmade. The gala was being held at the newly completed Peterson Children's Wing, a state-of-the-art facility that Evelyn had helped fund. As she stepped into the gleaming lobby, she was immediately greeted by Dr. Sarah Chen, the hospital's dynamic young director of pediatric services. "Mrs. Bennett, we're so grateful you could join us tonight," Sarah beamed, her enthusiasm genuine and warm. "There's someone I'd love for you to meet. She's starting a revolutionary program for medically fragile children in the foster care system." Before Evelyn could politely deflect, as she usually did, Sarah was already guiding her through the crowd toward a tall woman with silver-streaked dark hair who stood surrounded by a small group of engaged listeners. This was Maria Rodriguez, Evelyn would soon learn, and this chance meeting would become the pivot point around which her entire life would turn. Maria turned, her warm brown eyes crinkling at the corners as she smiled. "Mrs. Bennett, your reputation precedes you. I've heard so much about your work with the hospital." Her voice carried the slight lilt of her native Argentina, but it was the passion in her words that caught Evelyn's attention. "We're trying to create something new here, a bridge between medical care and permanent homes for our most vulnerable children." As Maria began to explain her vision, Evelyn felt something stir within her that she hadn't experienced in years, a spark of genuine curiosity, of possibility. Maria spoke of children with complex medical needs who languished in hospital rooms long after they were medically ready for discharge, simply because there were no foster families equipped to handle their care. She described a program that would train and support foster parents, providing them with the skills and resources needed to care for these special children. "The problem," Maria explained, her eyes intense with conviction, "is that these children need more than just medical care. They need love, stability, a chance at a normal life. But most potential foster parents are intimidated by the medical requirements, and those who might be willing often lack the resources to provide the necessary care." Something in Maria's words struck a chord deep within Evelyn's heart. She thought of her empty house, her unused resources, her years of accumulated wisdom with nothing to shape, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she heard herself speak without the careful consideration that had governed her life for so long. "What if I could help?" The words surprised even her as they left her lips. Not just with funding, but more. Maria's eyes widened slightly, and Dr. Chan stepped closer, her interest piqued. "What are you thinking, Mrs. Bennett?" Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling as though she stood on the edge of something momentous. I have a large home, significant resources, and frankly, far too much time on my hands. What if we could use my house as a pilot program? Create a space where foster parents could train, where children could recover in a home environment, where we could prove that this model works. The words tumbled out faster now, her mind racing ahead with possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to consider in years. I could take the foster parent training myself. My home could be modified for medical equipment. We could create a support system, nurses, therapists, educators, everything these children need to thrive. Maria and Sarah exchanged glances, and Evelyn could see the wheels turning in their minds. Mrs. Bennet, Maria said carefully, are you saying you'd be willing to become a foster parent yourself? The question hung in the air, heavy with possibility. Evelyn thought of her empty house, of the rooms waiting to be filled with purpose, of the love she had stored up for so many years with nowhere to direct it. Yes, she said, surprising herself with the firmness of her conviction. Yes, I believe I am. What followed over the next several months would transform not only Evelyn's life but the lives of countless others. The process began with intensive foster parent training, where Evelyn threw herself into learning everything from basic childcare to complex medical procedures. Her home underwent careful modifications, hospital beds disguised as regular furniture, medical equipment integrated seamlessly into beautiful rooms, an elevator installed to ensure accessibility to all floors. The first child to come into Evelyn's care was 4-year-old Sophie, born with a complex heart condition that required constant monitoring. Sophie had spent most of her young life in hospitals, her bright spirit somehow undiminished by the sterile environments and endless procedures. The day she arrived at Evelyn's home, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit and staring wide-eyed at the grand staircase, something fundamental shifted in the universe of both their lives. Is this really where I get to stay? Sophie whispered, her small hand gripping Evelyn's tightly. Yes, sweetheart, Evelyn replied, fighting back tears as she watched the child take in her surroundings. This is your home for as long as you need it to be. Sophie was just the beginning. Over the next 2 years, Evelyn's home became a sanctuary for children with complex medical needs. Each room that had once stood empty and cold came alive with purpose. The library transformed into a cheerful classroom where tutors worked with children who had missed months or years of traditional schooling. The formal dining room became a place of joyous chaos, where children with feeding tubes learned to enjoy mealtimes alongside those who could eat normally. The program grew beyond anything Evelyn had initially imagined. Other wealthy homeowners, inspired by her example, began opening their homes. Maria's training program expanded, creating a network of specially educated foster parents across the city. The Children's Hospital developed new protocols for transitioning medically complex children from hospital to home care, using Evelyn's house as a model. But it was the small moments that marked the true transformation in Evelyn's life. It was teaching Sophie to read, watching her sound out words with determined concentration. It was holding 8-year-old Marcus through his night terrors, his body racked by memories of past trauma. It was celebrating when 12-year-old Lily took her first steps after a devastating accident, the whole household erupting in cheers. On the morning of her 80th birthday, Evelyn stood in her garden, watching as 6 children, her current foster family, helped Maria's teenage son set up decorations for the afternoon celebration. The Victorian mansion's grounds, once manicured to sterile perfection, now bloomed with wheelchair-accessible paths, a therapeutic swimming pool, and raised garden beds where children in wheelchairs could tend their own flowers and vegetables. Grandma Evelyn, called Sophie, now 6 years old and thriving after her 3rd heart surgery. Look what I made for you. She proudly held up a handmade card covered in glitter and hand-drawn hearts. Her medical port was barely visible under her party dress, and her smile, that incredible, resilient smile, lit up her entire face. Evelyn knelt down carefully to accept the card, her knees protesting but her heart soaring. 2 years ago, she would have worried about the glitter on her expensive slacks or the dirt smudges from Sophie's garden-dirty hands. Now, these marks were badges of honor, evidence of a life truly lived. Inside, the house hummed with activity. The once formal living room had become a physical therapy space, where 13-year-old Marcus was working with his therapist, determined to master his crutches before the party. His leg braces, decorated with superhero stickers, caught the morning light. 3 years after the car accident that had claimed his parents and his ability to walk, Marcus had become the household's unofficial big brother, always ready with a joke or encouragement for newer arrivals. In the kitchen, Lily, now 14 and headed for a full recovery, was teaching 4-year-old Tommy how to crack eggs for the birthday cake. Tommy's feeding tube hadn't stopped him from developing a passionate interest in cooking, even though he could only taste tiny amounts of food. His nurse supervised carefully, but her presence had become so natural that it felt like having another family member in the house. Mrs. Bennet, Angela, the newest addition to their household, appeared in her wheelchair at the garden door. At 15, she had spent most of her life in hospitals before a rare genetic condition was finally diagnosed. Her dark eyes, wise beyond their years, steadied Evelyn carefully. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." Evelyn settled onto a garden bench beside Angela's wheelchair. These quiet conversations had become some of her most treasured moments. "Why did you really decide to do all this? You could have just given money to the hospital or the foster system. Instead, you..." Angela gestured at the busy garden, the transformed house, the makeshift family they had all become. Evelyn was quiet for a moment, watching Sophie teach 3-year-old Maya, their newest arrival, how to make a daisy chain. Maya's oxygen tank was decorated with butterfly stickers, transforming what could have been scary medical equipment into something almost magical. "I spent most of my life thinking success meant having things," Evelyn finally replied. "A beautiful house, expensive clothes, a prominent position in society. When my husband died, I realized I had everything and nothing at the same time." She reached over to straighten the bright scarf covering Angela's head, still sparse from chemotherapy. "But then I met Maria, and she helped me see that all those things I had, the house, the resources, even the loneliness, they weren't an ending. They were tools waiting to be used for something meaningful." Angela absorbed this with the thoughtful consideration that Evelyn had come to expect from children who had faced adult challenges far too young. "Do you ever regret it? Taking on all of us, with all our problems?" Evelyn's laugh was soft but genuine. "Oh, sweetheart, the only regret I have is not doing it sooner." The afternoon party brought together an extraordinary gathering. Social workers who had initially been skeptical of an elderly woman taking on medically complex foster children now brought new candidates for the program. Doctors and nurses who had become more like family than medical professionals shared cake with former foster children who had been adopted but still considered Evelyn's house their second home. 3 other wealthy families who had followed Evelyn's example and opened their homes came with their own foster children, creating a community that none of them had imagined possible 2 years ago. Maria stood to give a toast, her voice carrying across the garden where medical equipment blended seamlessly with birthday decorations. When Mrs. Bennet Evelyn first proposed this idea, many thought it was impossible. An elderly woman fostering children with complex medical needs? But she showed us that the impossible becomes possible when we open our hearts to new ways of creating family. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the garden, Evelyn found herself surrounded by her unconventional family. Marcus had mastered his crutches enough to stand beside her for photos. Sophie sat in her lap, carefully avoiding the tubes that connected Tommy to his medical equipment. Lily helped Angela position her wheelchair for the group picture, while Maya's parents, finally ready to take her home after months of medical training, captured the moment on their phones. The photographer, documenting the program's success for a national healthcare journal, called out, "Mrs. Bennet, what would you say to other people considering following your example?" Evelyn looked around at the gathering, the children who had become her family, the medical professionals who had become friends, the community that had grown from one woman's decision to transform emptiness into purpose. She thought about the journal Richard had given her, now filled with the daily joys and challenges of their extraordinary household. "I would tell them that it's never too late to create the family you were meant to have," she said finally. "That love doesn't have to follow traditional paths to be real and meaningful, and that sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the chance to give to others." Later that night, after the party had wound down and the night nurses had taken their positions, Evelyn sat in her garden, The medical equipment hummed softly in the background, mixing with the sound of crickets and the distant laughter of children being tucked into bed. Her house was no longer a museum to a life half-lived, but a vibrant, breathing testament to love's ability to transform and heal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, medical procedures, therapy sessions, the inevitable heartache of saying goodbye to children ready to move on, and the joy of welcoming new ones who needed their special brand of care. But for now, Evelyn sat in the gathering darkness, profoundly grateful for the twist of fate that had led her to this unexpected life. A soft voice called from inside, "Grandma Evelyn, Maya's asking for her bedtime story." Evelyn smiled, rising from her garden bench with the energy of purpose that had become her constant companion. At 80 years old, she had finally found what she had spent her whole life searching for, not in the quiet perfection she had once craved, but in the beautiful chaos of a life overflowing with love. As autumn painted the garden in rich golds and crimsons, Evelyn found herself increasingly sought after by organizations across the country wanting to replicate her program. The success stories of her foster children had caught the attention of national media, and a documentary filmmaker had begun following their daily lives, capturing the delicate balance of medical care and normal childhood moments that made their household unique. One crisp October morning, as Evelyn reviewed blueprints for the conversion of a mansion in Boston into a similar medical foster home, she heard the familiar whir of Maya's oxygen machine approaching her study. The little girl's dark curls bounced as she navigated her walker with growing confidence. "Grandma Evelyn," Maya whispered, her eyes bright with excitement, "Dr. Chan says I might not need oxygen at night anymore. Can we have a special dinner to celebrate?" Evelyn pulled the child onto her lap, careful of the tubes that were becoming less necessary with each passing week. "Of course we can, sweetheart. What would you like? Can we have everyone? Even the kids who left? And can Marcus make his special pasta?" Maya's voice grew stronger with each question, a far cry from the whispered words she could barely manage when she first arrived. The mention of Marcus brought a proud smile to Evelyn's face. The teenager had not only mastered his crutches, but had discovered a passion for cooking during his long recovery. His special pasta had become legendary among their extended family of current and former foster children, medical staff, and support workers. That evening, their dinner table stretched to its full length to accommodate what had become their extraordinary extended family. Marcus, now able to stay in for longer periods, supervised Tommy as they prepared the meal together. Tommy's feeding tube was still necessary, but he had progressed to being able to taste small amounts, making him an enthusiastic sous chef. Lily, home from her first semester at college where she was studying physical therapy, helped Angela arrange flowers for the table. Angela's head now sported a crop of dark curls, her successful treatment allowing her to focus on her dreams of becoming a pediatric oncologist. Sophie, their heart warrior, flitted between guests, her energy belying the scars hidden beneath her favorite sparkly shirt. The doorbell chimed continuously as their community arrived. Dr. Chun, who had become more friend than physician, brought her family. Maria, whose initial proposal had sparked this transformation, arrived with 3 new potential foster parents eager to learn from Evelyn's experience. Social workers who had once been skeptical now brought updates about successfully placed children and news of others who might benefit from their program. As Evelyn surveyed the gathering, she noticed how seamlessly medical equipment blended with the warmth of family life. Nurses chatted with guests while monitoring vital signs. Therapy dogs, now a regular part of their household, weaved between legs and wheelchair wheels. The mansion's formal dining room buzzed with conversation in English and Spanish, punctuated by the beeping of medical monitors and children's laughter. "Mrs. Bennett," called out Rebecca, a journalist working on a piece about medical foster care reform, "would you say your program has achieved what you hoped?" Evelyn watched as Marcus proudly served his pasta, his braces now decorated with stickers from each child who had passed through their home. She saw Tommy carefully taste a tiny portion, his nurse standing by with the same proud expression as any parent. Maya demonstrated her stronger breathing by blowing on her hot pasta, while Angela discussed medical school prerequisites with Dr. Chun. "What I hoped for," Evelyn replied thoughtfully, "was to fill an empty house with purpose. What we've created is something far beyond that." We've shown that family isn't limited by age, blood, or medical conditions. We've proven that with the right support, these children can thrive. But most importantly, we've demonstrated that it's never too late to create meaningful change in our own lives and in the world. The success of their program had inspired changes throughout the foster care system. Insurance companies had begun covering home medical care more comprehensively after seeing the cost benefits compared to extended hospital stays. Wealthy individuals in other cities had opened their homes, creating a network of medical foster care havens. But beyond the systemic changes, they had created something more precious, a model of family that transcended traditional boundaries. Later that night, as the guests departed and the night nurses took their positions, Evelyn sat in her favorite chair in the library. The room now housed not only books but also medical reference materials, children's stories, and photo albums documenting their journey. The walls, once decorated with expensive art, now displayed framed artwork by little hands and professional photographs capturing moments of triumph, first steps, removed feeding tubes, successful surgeries. Sophie appeared in her pajamas, clutching her worn stuffed rabbit. At 6, she had become an unofficial ambassador for their program, fearlessly showing her scars to new children and explaining medical procedures in terms other kids could understand. "Can I sit with you, Grandma Evelyn?" she asked, climbing up before waiting for an answer. "I was thinking about something." "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" "Remember when you told me that some people thought you were too old to be a foster mom?" Sophie snuggled closer. "Those people were silly. Being old just means you have more love saved up." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes as she hugged the little girl. "That's a very wise way to look at it. And you know what else?" Sophie continued, yawning. "I think your house was just waiting for all of us, like it knew we needed a special place to get better." As Sophie drifted off to sleep in her arms, Evelyn reflected on the child's words. The house had indeed been waiting, not just for these children, but for her own transformation from a wealthy widow into something she had never imagined becoming. A beacon of hope for a broken system. A gentle knock at the library door drew her attention. Maria stood there, holding a thick manila envelope and wearing an expression that Evelyn had come to recognize as her big news face. "She's right, you know," Maria said softly, nodding toward the sleeping Sophie. "About the house waiting. About all of it." She settled into the adjacent chair, carefully opening the envelope. "The state committee reviewed our data today. They're not just approving the expansion, they're recommending our model as the new standard for medically complex foster care across the state." Evelyn gently stroked Sophie's hair, feeling the steady rise and fall of her breathing. "What does that mean for the children still waiting?" "It means everything," Maria whispered, her eyes bright with unshed tears. 5 more homes like yours will open in the next 6 months. The training program we developed will become mandatory for medical foster parents. Insurance companies have agreed to cover home care equipment and nursing support. Evelyn, you've changed the entire landscape of medical foster care. The weight of this news settled around them like a warm blanket. Through the window, Evelyn could see lights still on in various rooms of the house. Night nurses making their rounds, older children studying late, the soft glow of medical equipment that had become as natural to their home as table lamps. "Did you ever imagine this?" Maria asked, gesturing to encompass not just the sleeping child and the adapted house, but the entire movement they had sparked. Evelyn smiled, remembering the lonely widow she had been just 3 years ago. "I imagined many things in my life, Maria. Success, wealth, status. But this?" She shook her head. "This is beyond anything I could have dreamed." A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Marcus appeared in his wheelchair, which he now used only when his legs were particularly tired. Behind him, Angela pushed her four-pole, and Tommy trailed with his tablet used for communication. "Sorry to interrupt," Marcus said, his voice carrying the excitement of barely contained news. "But we've been working on something, and we don't want to wait until morning to show you." Tommy tapped on his tablet, and his electronic voice filled the room. "We made a presentation for the documentary people about what this home really means." Angela stepped forward, her newfound confidence evident in her stance despite the 4 poles she leaned against. "We interviewed everyone, the nurses, the doctors, the other kids, even the night janitor. We wanted to show what makes this place different. Sophie stirred at the voices but didn't wake as Marcus wheeled closer, pulling up a video on his laptop. The screen flickered to life, showing a montage of moments from their daily lives. Physical therapy sessions that turned into dance parties. Medical treatments accompanied by storytelling. Midnight feast in the kitchen when someone couldn't sleep due to pain or anxiety. But it was more than just a documentation of their activities. The children had captured the essence of what made their home unique. The way medical procedures became less frightening when shared with others who understood, how achievements were celebrated regardless of their size, how setbacks were met with unwavering support. We call it the heart of healing, Angela explained, her voice soft but proud. Because that's what you created here, Grandma Evelyn. Not just a place for our bodies to heal, but for our hearts too. The video showed moments Evelyn hadn't even realized were captured. Her reading stories in the hospital wing during late-night treatments. Marcus teaching younger children to navigate wheelchairs with confidence. Sophie explaining her heart surgery scars to a newly arrived child, making them seem like badges of honor rather than marks of trauma. As the presentation continued, more members of their household drifted into the library, drawn by the soft voices and gentle music of the video. Maya curled up on the floor, her oxygen tank decorated with this week's theme of underwater creatures. Lily paused in the doorway, home from college for the weekend and still wearing her physical therapy student badge. The final segment of the video featured interviews with the children themselves, each speaking about what the home meant to them. But it was Tommy's electronically voiced conclusion that brought tears to everyone's eyes. Some people think healing only happens in hospitals, but real healing happens when you're surrounded by love. That's what Grandma Evelyn built. Not just a home, but a place where love and medicine work together. The room fell silent as the video ended, filled with the kind of quiet that comes when hearts are too full for words. Evelyn looked around at the faces illuminated by the soft library lamps. Children who had become her family, medical professionals who had become friends, a house that had become a haven. Maria was the first to speak, her voice thick with emotion. This is what will show the state committee. This is what will show the world. This is how we'll change things. No, Evelyn corrected gently, still holding the sleeping Sophie while smiling at the family gathered around her. This is how things have already changed. Everything else is just catching up to what these children have known all along, that healing happens best when it happens at home. As the evening deepened, no one seemed eager to leave the library's warm embrace. Maya scooted closer to Marcus's wheelchair, her breathing stronger, but still accompanied by the soft whoosh of oxygen. "Can we tell Grandma Evelyn about the big idea?" she whispered, though her excitement made it more of a stage whisper that everyone could hear. Marcus exchanged glances with Angela and Tommy, a silent conversation passing between the older children who had become the unofficial leaders of their unique family. Angela nodded, adjusting her foreline as she settled more comfortably in her chair. "We've been thinking," Marcus began, his voice carrying the careful consideration of someone who had spent long hours planning, "about all the other kids like us in other cities who don't have a place like this yet, and about how you always say that everyone has something to give, Grandma Evelyn." Tommy's fingers flew across his tablet, and his electronic voice joined the conversation. "We want to start a mentoring program, kids like us, who've been through it all, helping new kids who are scared and don't know what to expect. But not just the medical stuff," Angela added quickly, her dark eyes bright with purpose. "We want to teach them what we've learned here, that it's okay to still be a kid even when you're sick, that having tubes or scars or wheelchairs doesn't define you." Evelyn felt Sophie stir in her arms, awakening to join the conversation. "Like how Marcus taught me to make my heart surgery scar into a superhero symbol," she mumbled sleepily. "Or how Angela helps new kids decorate their medical equipment." Maria leaned forward, her professional interest clearly piqued. "You're talking about peer support. That's actually a recognized therapeutic tool, but I've never seen it implemented in pediatric medical foster care. Because no one else has kids like us," Marcus said proudly. "Kids who've learned to be both patients and teachers. We understand both sides, the medical stuff and the scared kid stuff." The idea bloomed in the library's warm light as each child contributed their vision. Tommy described creating video guides for new children, showing them how to make medical procedures less frightening. Angela suggested a buddy system pairing experienced children with newcomers. Maya, despite her young age, insisted she could teach other kids how to make oxygen takes pretty. Evelyn watched in wonder as these children, who had once been defined by their medical challenges, transformed them into sources of wisdom and strength. She remembered each of them when they first arrived. Marcus, angry and withdrawn after his accident. Angela, terrified of her diagnosis. Tommy, unable to communicate his fears. Maya, too weak to lift her head. Now they sat in this library, planning ways to help others through similar journeys. There's more, Marcus continued, his confidence growing. We want to create a training program for other houses like ours. Not just the medical stuff that the doctors teach, but the other things we've learned, like how to make a medical room feel like a bedroom instead of a hospital, how to celebrate tiny victories, how to make space for both healing and living. Maria was already taking notes, her professional demeanor softened by obvious pride. This could be revolutionary. Peer support from children who truly understand both the medical and emotional challenges. It could transform how we approach medical foster care. And we want to call it Hearts Like Ours, Sophie announced, fully awake now and sitting up in Evelyn's lap. Because that's what Grandma Evelyn always says, that we all have hearts that can love and help others. Evelyn felt tears welling in her eyes as she looked at these remarkable children, her children, who had taken their challenges and transformed them into gifts they could share with others. The documentary crew, still filming quietly in the corner, had captured something extraordinary. The moment when those who had been helped became the helpers. Dr. Chun, who had remained silent during the children's presentation, spoke up from her position near the door. This is exactly what we need. The medical community can provide the technical knowledge, but there's no substitute for the kind of understanding these children can offer. They've lived it, they've overcome it, and now they want to help others do the same. As if on cue, a soft chime sounded from one of the medical monitors in the room. Not an alarm, but a gentle reminder that even in moments of inspiration, care had to continue. Without breaking the flow of conversation, Angela checked her phone. Marcus adjusted his position to prevent stiffness, and Maya took a deep breath from her oxygen tube. These medical needs had become so seamlessly integrated into their lives that they were just another part of their story, not the whole story. You know what this means, don't you? Maria asked, looking at Evelyn with knowing eyes. Your vision isn't just growing, it's evolving. These children aren't just beneficiaries of the program anymore. They're becoming its heart and soul. They're becoming more than that. Evelyn responded to Maria, her voice soft but clear. They're becoming leaders in their own right. She watched as Marcus pulled out a notebook filled with detailed plans written in his careful handwriting. The same determination that had gotten him back on his feet was now focused on helping others. The documentary filmmaker, Sarah, who had been filming quietly in the corner, stepped forward. This is exactly what we've been trying to capture. The transformation from a medical foster home to something entirely new. A community of healers helping other healers. As if to illustrate her point, a small commotion arose from the hallway. Jenny, their newest arrival, stood hesitating at the library door. At just 5 years old, she had spent most of her life in hospitals before joining their family 2 days ago. Her chemotherapy port was still new enough to be frightening, and night times had been especially hard. Without prompting, Angela rose from her chair, her own forepaw forgotten as she moved toward the younger child. Can't sleep? She asked gently. Me neither. Sometimes. Want to see something cool? Jenny nodded shyly, her eyes wide as Angela led her to a comfortable window seat. From her pocket, Angela pulled out a small UV flashlight and held it over her own forepaw. Watch this, she whispered. In the dark, the medical equipment began to glow with tiny stars that Angela had painted using special non-toxic paint. Would you like stars on yours too? Angela asked. We can do any constellation you want. Mine is Orion, because he was a brave warrior, just like us. Jenny's face lit up with the first real smile they'd seen since her arrival. Can I have the Big Dipper? My mom used to show it to me from my hospital window. Of course you can, Angela smiled. And tomorrow, we can look up its story in our astronomy books. Did you know that every star has a story? Evelyn watched this interaction with a full heart. remembering when Angela had first arrived, too terrified of her own medical equipment to look at it. Now here she was, transforming another child's fear into wonder. Marcus wheeled himself closer to the window seat, his notebook open. You know, Jenny, this is exactly the kind of thing we want to put in our guide for new kids. Would it be okay if we included your story about the stars? Other children might like that idea too. Jenny nodded enthusiastically, already looking more comfortable in her new surroundings. Tommy tapped on his tablet, and his electronic voice added, "We could make a whole section about making medical stuff less scary, like how Maya decorates her oxygen tubes with underwater creatures, and how Sophie turns her ECG leads into a light show with glow-in-the-dark stickers." Lily added from her position by the door, her physical therapy textbook temporarily forgotten. Dr. Chun, who had been taking notes throughout the evening, spoke up. "This is precisely what traditional medical training doesn't cover, the emotional aspect of medical care from a child's perspective. What you're creating here could revolutionize how we approach pediatric care in general, not just in foster situations." Maria was already expanding on the idea. We could develop training modules, have the children record their experiences, their coping strategies, create a library of resources for other medical foster homes, hospitals, even regular foster families who might be hesitant to take in children with medical needs. "But it has to stay personal," Sophie insisted from her place in Evelyn's lap. "That's what makes our home special. We're not just patients here, we're family." "That's exactly right," Evelyn agreed. Watching as Jenny settled more comfortably between Angela and Marcus, her earlier fear forgotten in the warmth of their acceptance. Everything we do here starts with that understanding that medical care works best when it's wrapped in love. The documentary crew captured these moments with quiet reverence. Angela teaching Jenny about constellations, Marcus making notes for their guide, Tommy programming encouraging messages into his tablet to share with new arrivals. These were more than just heartwarming scenes. They were glimpses of a revolutionary approach to medical foster care being born from the wisdom of the children themselves. Sarah, the filmmaker, turned to Evelyn. "When we started this documentary, we thought we were covering a story about an elderly woman who transformed her mansion into a medical foster home. But it's become so much more than that, hasn't it?" "Yes," Evelyn replied, watching as her family of healers continued to grow and evolve before her eyes. "It's become a story about how love can transform not just a house, but an entire system. And most importantly, it's become a story about how those who have been healed can become the most powerful healers of all." As the night deepened, the library had become a cocoon of quiet purpose. Jenny had fallen asleep against Angela's shoulder, her small hand clutching the UV flashlight like a talisman. The documentary crew continued filming, capturing the organic way medical care and emotional support wove together in their home. Mrs. Bennett, Sarah, the filmmaker, said softly, "We've been documenting medical facilities across the country for this series, but we've never seen anything quite like this. Would you be willing to share how this approach evolved? It could help other facilities understand that there's a different way." Before Evelyn could respond, a quiet alarm chimed from Tommy's medical monitor. Without missing a beat, Marcus reached over to help him adjust his feeding tube while continuing to write in his notebook. The seamless integration of medical care into their daily life was so natural now that it barely interrupted their conversation. "I think," Evelyn began, watching this interaction with knowing eyes, "the approach evolved because we stopped seeing medical care as something separate from daily life. In hospitals, treatment is the focus. Here, life is the focus, and treatment is just part of living." Maya, fighting sleep but determined to be part of the conversation, added through a yawn, "And we make everything an adventure. Remember when we turned physical therapy into a treasure hunt?" Dr. Chon nodded enthusiastically. "That's actually become part of our standard protocol now. The treasure hunt therapy method has been remarkably effective, especially with younger patients. We've seen significant improvements in participation and outcomes." Maria pulled out her tablet, bringing up a series of charts. "The data supports what we're seeing. Children in this program are showing faster recovery times, better medication compliance, and significantly improved emotional well-being compared to traditional medical foster care settings." "But it's more than just the numbers," Lily interjected, her college training giving weight to her words. As a physical therapy student now, I'm learning that standard medical training doesn't typically address the emotional aspects of healing. What we've created here, it's a whole new paradigm. Sophie, still curled in Evelyn's lap, stared at Lily's words. Can you explain that in kid words? She asked, making everyone smile. She means we're showing people a new way to help kids get better, Angela explained, carefully shifting Jenny without disturbing her sleep. Not just their bodies, but their hearts too. The documentary crew moved quietly around the room, capturing these natural interactions. Sarah's camera focused on the wall behind Evelyn's chair, where a collection of framed artwork hung, medical diagrams transformed into colorful masterpieces by small hands, 4 poles decorated to look like rainbow trees, oxygen masks painted with superhero designs. This is what we need to share with the world, Sarah said, her camera panning across the room. Not just the medical success stories, but how you've created an environment where healing becomes a collaborative adventure rather than a lonely journey. As if to illustrate her point, Jenny stirred in her sleep, momentarily frightened by her unfamiliar surroundings. Before any adult could react, Angela was already humming softly, showing how her 4-port stars glowed in the dim light. Jenny settled immediately, comforted by the presence of someone who truly understood her fears. That's what makes this place special, Marcus observed, his voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had journeyed from patient to healer. We're not just getting medical care. We're learning how to turn our challenges into ways to help others. Tommy's tablet voiced his thoughts. And we're showing that family isn't about being perfect. It's about being there for each other, tubes and all. Maria was rapidly taking notes, her professional demeanor softened by the scene before her. This is what we need to incorporate into the training programs for other facilities. Not just the medical protocols, but this spirit of community healing. Dr. Chen added thoughtfully, the medical community tends to focus on individual treatment plans, but what you've created here is a healing ecosystem. Every child who comes through these doors becomes part of a continuous cycle of support and understanding. Evelyn watched as her family continued to demonstrate exactly what Dr. Chan was describing. Maya had dozed off on the window seat, her oxygen tank decorated with glow-in-the-dark sea creatures that seemed to swim in the dim light. Marcus had shifted his wheelchair to keep both Jenny and Maya in his protective line of sight, even as he continued working on plans for their mentoring program. Angela gently adjusted Jenny's chemotherapy port without waking her, drawing from her own experience to ensure the young girl's comfort. You know what's remarkable? Sarah mused, her camera capturing these tender moments. In most medical documentaries, the equipment of the tubes, monitors, and machines dominates the scene. Here, they're just props in a larger story of love and connection. It's because here, the equipment tells our stories, Sophie murmured sleepily from Evelyn's lap, pointing to her own heart monitor. See the stickers? Each one is from something special. This rainbow one was from my first day back at school, and this butterfly is from when I learned to swim. The documentary crew zoomed in on the decorated monitor, capturing how something typically sterile and medical had been transformed into a chronicle of triumph and joy. Sarah, the filmmaker, knelt beside Sophie's chair, genuinely intrigued. Can you tell me about more of your stickers? But before Sophie could answer, a new voice joined the conversation. Excuse me? A tall figure appeared in the doorway. James Chen, Dr. Chen's 17-year-old son, who had been helping with the evening's filming as part of his senior project on healthcare innovation. His eyes were wide with excitement. I think I just had an idea. Dr. Chen looked at her son with curiosity. What is it, James? Well, I've been editing some of the footage we've shot here, and I noticed something. Every piece of medical equipment in this house tells a story. What if we created an app? Something that lets kids document their medical journey through pictures and stories attached to their equipment. His words tumbled out faster as his excitement grew. Like a social media platform, but for kids with medical needs. They could share how they decorated their equipment, tell their stories, connect with other kids who understand. Marcus straightened in his wheelchair, instantly alert. Like a virtual version of what we do here, kids could support each other even if they're in different hospitals or cities. Tommy's fingers flew across his tablet. We could have different sections, one for decoration ideas, one for coping strategies, one for celebration moments. Angela carefully shifted Jenny, who was still sleeping peacefully, and added, "And we could include all the things we've learned, like how to make forepaws less scary, or how to turn therapy exercises into games." Maria was already pulling out her phone, making rapid notes. This could be revolutionary, a peer support network that combines practical advice with emotional support, all from the children's perspective. "But it has to stay safe," Evelyn interjected gently, her protective instinct surfacing. "These children are vulnerable. We need to ensure their privacy and security." Dr. Chan nodded thoughtfully. "We could work with children's hospitals to verify users and moderate content. Maybe start with a pilot program among our existing network of medical foster homes." The energy in the room had shifted, despite the late hour. Even Maya had stirred from her nap, listening intently as James continued to develop his idea. "What if we called it Brave Hearts Network?" Sophie suggested, suddenly wide awake. "Because you have to be brave to go through medical stuff, but you don't have to be brave alone." Lily, who had been quietly observing, spoke up from her corner. "This could be incredible for my physical therapy patients too. Sometimes the hardest part of rehabilitation is feeling isolated, feeling like nobody understands what you're going through." The documentary crew was capturing every moment of this spontaneous brainstorming session, their cameras moving between faces animated with purpose and possibility. Sarah had tears in her eyes as she filmed, recognizing that she was witnessing the birth of something extraordinary. Marcus had already opened his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "We could start by documenting everything we've learned here, all our little tricks and traditions, like how we celebrate tube-free days, or how we turn bandage changes into art sessions." Jenny stirred in her sleep, and Angela automatically reached to adjust her port. The movement caught James's attention, and he quickly focused his camera on Angela's gentle hands as she showed the sleeping child's star-decorated port. "That's it exactly," he said softly. "These moments, these solutions. Every child going through medical treatment should have access to this kind of knowledge and support." Evelyn watched as her family's impact continued to expand beyond the walls of their home. What had started as a simple desire to fill an empty house had grown into a movement, and now it was evolving again, reaching toward a future where no child would have to face medical challenges alone. As the excitement about the Brave Hearts Network bubbled through the room, Evelyn noticed something remarkable happening. Each child, despite the late hour and their various medical needs, was unconsciously shifting into the roles they had naturally developed within their family, roles that could now help shape this new digital community. Marcus, ever the organizer, had already created a rough outline on his laptop. "We should structure it like our house," he suggested, his medical alert bracelet catching the light as he typed. "Different rooms for different needs. Like how we have the quiet room for bad days, the celebration corner for good news, and the comfort kitchen." Maya chimed in, her oxygen tube swishing as she sat up straighter. "Where we share all our special recipes for when medicine makes food taste funny." Tommy's tablet voiced his contribution. "We need a space like our library too, where kids can learn about their conditions in ways that aren't scary, with stories from other kids who've been through it." Angela, still cradling the sleeping Jenny, looked thoughtful. "What about a virtual art therapy space, where kids can share how they decorate their medical equipment? Jenny's going to want to show off her constellation port when we finish it tomorrow." The documentary crew moved quietly around the room, capturing these moments of inspiration. Sarah focused her camera on the wall of photographs behind Evelyn's chair, images that told the story of their journey. First steps after surgeries, port removal celebrations, homework completed in hospital beds, holiday gatherings where medical equipment was decorated to match the festivities. "This is what we need to capture in the app," James said, following Sarah's gaze. "Not just the medical journey, but the life that happens alongside it." Dr. Chuan had pulled out her tablet and was making rapid notes. "We could integrate it with existing hospital systems, create a secure platform where medical professionals can also participate, learn from the children's experiences." "But it has to stay kid-centered," Sophie insisted from Evelyn's lap, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent more time in hospitals than playgrounds. "Doctors know about medicine, but we know about being sick kids." Lily, who had been quietly observing, added her perspective as both a former patient and future medical professional. What if we created different levels of access? The children's space stays their own, but there's a professional interface where medical staff can learn from their experiences. Maria was nodding enthusiastically, and we could include training modules based on what we've learned here. Show other medical foster homes how to create this kind of healing environment. Jenny stirred in her sleep, making a small, distressed sound. Before anyone could react, Angela was already humming the lullaby they used during difficult procedures, while Marcus reached for the star projector they kept for night fears. The seamless coordination between them demonstrated exactly what made their home special. "That's what we need to capture," Sarah said softly, her camera recording the moment. "Not just the strategies and solutions, but this choreography of care. The way you all move together to support each other." James was typing rapidly on his phone. "We could have a section called Nightlights for sharing comfort strategies during hard times, and maybe Victory Valley for celebrating achievements, no matter how small, and Bridge of Brave Hearts," Tommy's device suggested, "where new kids can connect with experienced ones." Evelyn watched as the idea took shape, transformed by each child's contribution. Their experiences, the fears they'd overcome, the victories they'd celebrated, the comfort they'd learned to offer, were becoming a blueprint for something larger than themselves. Maya, fighting sleep but determined to participate, mumbled, "Can we have a section for siblings too? Like how Marcus helps me understand my oxygen levels, or how Angela taught Jenny about her port." "Actually," Dr. Chan interjected gently, "that's an often overlooked aspect of pediatric care, the role of siblings and peer support in the healing process. What you children do naturally here could revolutionize how we approach family-centered care." The energy in the room was palpable, despite the late hour. Even the medical monitors seemed to beep in rhythm with their excitement, their usual clinical tones softened by the decorations and modifications that made them part of the family's story. "But how do we make sure it feels like home?" Sophie asked suddenly, her small hand reaching up to touch Evelyn's cheek. "The app, I mean. How do we make it feel safe and warm like our house does?" The question hung in the air, profound in its simplicity. Everyone in the room understood that they weren't just building a social network or medical support app. They were trying to digitize the essence of what made their home special. "Maybe," Marcus suggested thoughtfully, "we start with the sounds." His fingers moved across his laptop keyboard as he explained. "You know how each room in our house has its own feeling? Like how the meditation room has the water fountain, and the therapy room has our special playlist?" Angela nodded enthusiastically, still holding the sleeping Jenny. "We could record all our comfort sounds, like the lullaby we sing during procedures, or the celebration bell in the kitchen. And the stories," Tommy's device added. "All the stories we tell each other during treatments. About brave knights fighting dragon diseases and friendship potions stronger than any medicine." Maya's oxygen tank whirred softly as she scooted closer to James, who was rapidly sketching interface designs on his tablet. "Could we make it look like our house? With virtual rooms you can visit when you need different kinds of help?" Dr. Chan was watching this exchange with growing excitement. "This is extraordinary," she whispered to Evelyn. "They're not just creating an app, they're translating their emotional support system into a digital space." Lily, who had been taking notes for her physical therapy coursework, spoke up. "What if each user could customize their virtual space? Like how we all decorated our medical equipment here? It could help children feel ownership of their medical journey." "That's it," James exclaimed, his fingers flying across his tablet. "What if every user gets their own heart home to customize? With rooms for different needs, a quiet room for hard days, a celebration space for victories, a comfort kitchen for sharing coping strategies, and a special room for stargazing," Jenny murmured sleepily from Angela's arms, surprising everyone. Like Angela's starport, the documentary crew moved quietly around the room, capturing the tender moment as Angela showed Jenny her glowing port stars again. Sarah zoomed in on their faces, illuminated by the soft constellation light. A perfect illustration of how comfort and care could be passed from one child to another. "We need to include all the traditions we've created," Marcus continued, his medical alert bracelet catching the light as he gestured. "Like how we celebrate every milestone, no matter how small. Port flushes with bubble parties, first steps after surgery with golden shoe awards, and the courage beads, Sophie exclaimed. Every user could have a virtual courage bead collection, like we do here, different colors for different challenges they faced. Maria, who had been quietly observing, began to nod. This could revolutionize how we track patient experiences. Instead of just medical data, we'd have a complete picture of their emotional journey as well. But it has to stay magical, Maya insisted, fighting sleep to make her point. Like our house, where medical stuff isn't scary because it's part of our story. Evelyn watched as her family continued to shape this new vision, each child contributing from their unique perspective. What had started as James's technical idea was being transformed by the wisdom and experience of children who had learned to turn medical challenges into opportunities for connection. Tommy's device spoke again. We should have a special welcome for new users, like how we all help when someone new arrives here. Maybe their first virtual room could be the story room, where they can see videos of all of us sharing our journeys. And mentor matches, Angela added, gently adjusting Jenny's sleeping position. Like how we pair up here based on similar conditions or treatments. The app could help connect kids who understand exactly what each other is going through. As the ideas flowed, Evelyn noticed how the medical equipment in the room, the 4 poles, oxygen tanks, feeding tubes, and monitors, had become almost invisible, yet remained an integral part of their story. Each piece had been transformed by love and creativity into something more than its medical purpose. Now, they were trying to achieve that same transformation in the digital realm. You know what else we need? Sophie said, sitting up straighter in Evelyn's lap. We need Grandma Evelyn's wisdom corner in the app, because sometimes the most important medicine is the kind that helps your heart. The room fell quiet for a moment, everyone turning to look at Evelyn. In the soft library light, surrounded by her extraordinary family, she felt the weight of what they created together. Not just a home, but a new way of healing that had grown far beyond what any of them had imagined. Maybe, Marcus suggested, his fingers hovering over his keyboard, we could have video messages from Grandma Evelyn for different situations, like the one she gives us when we're scared before procedures, or frustrated with physical therapy, or missing our old homes, or when we feel different from other kids, Maya added softly, her oxygen tube whistling slightly as she spoke. Remember what you told me, Grandma Evelyn, about how being different just means having a more interesting story to tell? Dr. Chun leaned forward, her professional interest clearly piqued. This emotional support component is often what's missing in medical care. Having these wisdom messages available 24/7 could be incredibly powerful for children struggling during off hours or between appointments. Sarah, the documentary filmmaker, had been capturing these exchanges with tears in her eyes. This is what makes your approach unique, she said. You're not just treating medical conditions, you're nurturing whole persons, with all their fears and hopes and dreams. Jenny stirred in Angela's arms, her eyes fluttering open. Can you tell the star story again? She asked sleepily, looking at Evelyn. The one about how everybody's light helps make the sky more beautiful. That's exactly the kind of thing we need in the app, James exclaimed, quickly making notes on his tablet. A library of Grandma Evelyn's stories, each one tagged for different situations or emotions. Tommy's device chimed in, and we could add our own stories too, about how we found our brave hearts, or how we learned to make friends with our medical equipment. It's like we're building a digital version of our family, Lily observed from her corner, her physical therapy textbook now forgotten in her lap. But instead of just 12 beds, we could reach thousands of children. Maria was nodding enthusiastically, and we could integrate it with the training programs for new medical foster homes. Show them how to create this kind of healing environment in their own spaces. As the conversation continued, the medical monitors in the room seemed to beep in harmony with their excitement. Angela had begun to hum softly to Jenny, who was drifting back to sleep, while Marcus's wheelchair squeaked gently as he shifted to show Maya his latest interface design. But we need to remember, Evelyn said softly, drawing everyone's attention, that technology is just a tool. What makes our home special is the love we put into everything we do. That's what we need to translate into this digital space. That's why we need the connection rooms, Sophie declared with the wisdom of a child who had spent too much time in hospitals. places where kids can find other kids who understand exactly what they're going through. Like how I helped Timmy last week when he was scared about his first port access. And support circles, Angela added, her own medical experience evident in her voice. Like how we all gathered around Maya's bed during her rough night last month, reading stories and sharing jokes until the pain medicine started working. James was sketching rapidly on his tablet. What if each user had their own virtual support circle? People they choose to have close by in the digital space, just like you all gather in person here. And achievement gardens, Maya exclaimed, her earlier sleepiness forgotten in her excitement, where everyone can plant virtual flowers for their victories, big ones for major milestones like finishing chemo, and little ones for daily brave moments like taking medicine without crying. The documentary crew moved quietly around the room, capturing these moments of inspiration. Sarah focused her camera on the wall of photographs, images of children who had passed through their home, each one contributing to the tapestry of healing they had woven together. You know what this really is? Dr. Chan said thoughtfully, looking around the room at the children who had become not just patients, but pioneers in a new approach to healing. It's the evolution of medicine, not just treating symptoms, but nurturing spirits, not just following protocols, but creating connections.